Early in the morning on December 16, 1944, everything flips upside down. More than 200,000 German troops from three massive armies suddenly slam into a weakly defended Allied line deep in the Ardennes Forest. This wasn't some random move. It was a bold, risky play meant to flip the entire war in Europe on its head. What followed became known as the Battle of the Bulge, a brutal month-long clash packed with freezing weather, non-stop firepower, and some of the harshest fighting of the entire war before the Allies finally managed to hold the line. But here's the real question everyone still argues about. Did it have to end that way? By late 1944, things were looking real bad for Nazi Germany. After the Allies stormed Normandy and the Soviets crushed German forces during their massive summer offensive, Germany's military situation was falling apart fast. Territory after territory slipped away, and with it went factories, fuel, and raw materials needed to keep the war machine running. In September 1944, the Reich Minister for Armaments and Munitions, Albert Speer, ran the numbers and admitted Germany only had enough resources left to fight for one more year. With pressure coming from every direction, panic started spreading inside Germany's leadership. On July 20, 1944, a group of German officers tried to take Hitler out in a failed assassination attempt. He survived, barely, and that close call only pushed him further. Hitler became convinced that the only way to regain control at home and momentum on the battlefield was to launch a massive counterattack in the West, and it had to be a win. At the same time, the Western Allies weren't exactly cruising either. Their rapid push across Western Europe stretched supply lines thin, forcing them to slow down, regroup, and restock. Over in the east, Soviet forces crossed into German territory for the first time in October, but the Germans managed to stop them, for now. Still, everyone knew a huge Soviet winter offensive was coming, aimed straight through Poland. Back in Germany, the regime went all in. Under the Total War program, extreme measures and full population mobilization scraped together the last reserves. It was a desperate gamble, but shockingly, German factories in 1944 cranked out more tanks and guns than ever before, even with Allied bombs raining down. The problem? The troops themselves. Many of these new units lacked proper training and confidence. Veteran instructor Gunter Kora wrote in his diary on October 9th that, "The rabble to be trained in our company consists of a mix of older East Europeans of German ethnic descent and naval personnel, who because of the shortage of ships are to be retrained as tank infantry." That line says everything. Manpower was a huge problem right out of the gate. Germany was scraping the bottom of the barrel, and it showed. New German divisions were badly under strength and nowhere near full fighting shape. While an average U.S. division rolled into battle with over 13,000 soldiers, German divisions in late 1944 were stuck at around 9,000 men or less. On top of that, their gear was outdated and unreliable, and artillery units were forced to rely on a messy mix of captured Soviet guns that barely fit together into a working system. Still, even these weak and rushed reserve units bought German commanders just enough breathing room to start putting real plans together for Hitler's big move. By September 1944, Hitler was fully locked in on launching an attack, and on the 16th, he finally sat down with his generals to talk details for the first time. That's when he made a critical call. Against most advice, he chose the so-called big solution instead of a smaller, safer strike toward Aachen and Liège. Hitler's vision was massive and risky. He wanted a full-scale offensive smashing through the Ardennes Forest, cutting off Allied forces in Western Germany and the Netherlands, and seizing the key port city of Antwerp. The Ardennes wasn't picked by accident. American troop levels there were thin, and the Germans remembered how they had pulled off a surprise breakthrough in the same region back in 1940. The plan followed a familiar script. Phase 1 called for crossing the Meuse River, then pushing north to capture Antwerp. But here's the wild part. The later stages of the operation were barely thought through. Plans for what happened after reaching the Meuse were vague, and there were zero concrete plans for what to do if German units actually reached the city. Hitler believed the shock alone would crush Allied morale and force Britain and the United States into a compromise peace, freeing German forces to shift east. Most of the generals weren't buying it at all. After the war, Gerd von Rundstedt openly admitted his doubts, saying, "If we had reached the Meuse, we should have got down on our knees and thanked God, let alone try to reach Antwerp." The rushed planning made things worse. Chief of Staff Alfred Jodl didn't have time to properly assess American strength in the area. leading to a dangerous underestimation of the enemy. Fuel was another nightmare. Many German units only had enough gas to move 30 or 40 kilometers, yet Jodl expected armored spearheads to cover nearly 200 kilometers to the Meuse in a single day. That meant capturing Allied fuel depots wasn't optional, it was survival. And hovering over all of this was one more gamble that could make or break everything: the weather. The entire operation rides on one risky hope: bad weather. Heavy clouds, snow and fog are supposed to ground Allied aircraft and shut down their overwhelming air power. Without that cover, the plan collapses fast. 3 German armies are thrown into the attack, each with a very different role and very different levels of strength. At the front of the punch is Sepp Dietrich's 6th SS Panzer Army, the strongest force Germany can still feel. It includes nearly all remaining SS Panzer divisions, backed by around 500 tanks and more than 1,000 artillery guns. Their mission is clear and aggressive: smash through the lines, cross the Meuse River, and drive straight toward Antwerp. To the south of Dietrich, Hasso von Manteuffel commands the 5th Panzer Army. With roughly 400 tanks, his force is tasked with pushing west and then forming a defensive line around Brussels. This army is expected to move fast, exploit breakthroughs, and help secure the gains made by the SS units. Holding the southern flank is Brandenberger's 7th Army, and this is where things start to look shaky. His force is by far the weakest of the 3. It's mostly unmotorized, has no tanks at all, and is barely mobile. Its job is to advance into Luxembourg and southern Belgium, then dig in and prepare defenses against the expected counterattack from George Patton's U.S. Third Army. That weakness is a major crack in the entire plan. With such a fragile southern flank, the whole operation is exposed from day one. If the 7th Army collapses, it could unravel everything the Germans managed to achieve further north. German commanders are fully aware of this risk, but there's nothing they can do. There are no reserves left to plug the gap. Altogether, Germany assembles more than 200,000 troops across 29 divisions, including 9 panzer divisions. On paper, it looks impressive. In reality, internal German reports admit that many of these divisions are poorly trained, under-equipped, and far from combat ready. Standing in their way are the U.S. First Army's V Corps under Leonard Jarrow and the U.S. Third Army's 8th Corps under Troy Middleton. Allied forces have problems of their own. First Army units are tied up attacking heavily defended rural river dams, while the Third Army is stretched thin across a wide front. General Omar Bradley's decision to spread U.S. forces lightly across the Ardennes leaves the sector dangerously exposed. And that thin line is exactly what the Germans are betting everything on. The entire operation hinges on one risky factor: bad weather. Heavy clouds and snow are expected to ground Allied aircraft and block their overwhelming air superiority. Without that cover, the German attack has little chance of success. 3 German armies are committed to the assault, each with a specific role and very different levels of strength. Sepp Dietrich's 6th SS Panzer Army forms the main Uder force. It is the strongest of the 3, made up of nearly all remaining SS Panzer divisions, supported by roughly 500 tanks and more than 1,000 artillery pieces. Its mission is ambitious: break through the Allied lines, cross the Meuse River, and push toward Antwerp. Alongside Dietrich operates the 5th Panzer Army, commanded by Hasso von Manteuffel. With around 400 tanks, his force is tasked with driving west and then establishing a defensive front around Brussels. Speed and momentum are critical, as his army is meant to secure gains made during the initial breakthrough. Covering the southern sector is Brandenberger's 7th Army, and this is where the plan shows serious weakness. His army is by far the least capable, mostly unmotorized, lacking tanks, and limited in mobility. Its assignment is to advance into Luxembourg and southern Belgium, then hold defensive positions against the expected counterattack from George Patton's U.S. Third Army. This weakness creates a dangerous flaw in the overall plan. The exposed southern flank is vulnerable from the very beginning, and a collapse there could undo any success achieved farther north. German commanders are fully aware of the danger but lack the reserves needed to reinforce the sector. Altogether, Germany assembles more than 200,000 men in 29 divisions, including 9 panzer divisions. Even German internal reports admit that many of these units suffer from low combat readiness. Opposing them are the U.S. First Army's V Corps under Leonard Jarrow and the U.S. Third Army's 8th Corps under Troy Middleton. Allied forces face challenges of their own. While First Army units are tied down near key river dams, General Omar Bradley's decision to spread forces thin across the Ardennes leaves the sector dangerously exposed. Another serious problem is the makeup of U.S. forces in the Ardennes. Many of the troops stationed there belong to cavalry groups, light mobile units designed to chase a retreating enemy. They work well in open terrain but struggle in static defense, especially in dense forests. By late 1944, the U.S. Army still hasn't fully adjusted its force structure from the fast summer advance to the slower, defensive reality of the fall. In total, roughly 80,000 American soldiers are spread across the Ardennes sector. That means 3 full German armies are about to crash into 2 largely unsuspecting American corps. Once weather forecasts confirm poor flying conditions, German commanders decide it's time to move. Throughout November and early December, German units deploy with extreme secrecy, shifting troops and supplies almost entirely at night. There are no cooking fires and no daylight movement at all. German reconnaissance planes fly low over the deployment zones at night to check progress and hunt for forbidden lights. But discipline holds. To hide the sound of engines, movement is carefully timed. Even though Allied reconnaissance notices signs of a German buildup, the warnings are either delayed or brushed off, leaving U.S. forces dangerously unprepared. Ironically, this obsession with secrecy creates new problems for the Germans. Supplies are often unloaded far from the front to avoid detection. Hitler and his generals prioritize security over logistics, leading to unnecessary strain. When the offensive finally begins, German forces have only about 15,000 tons of artillery ammunition, far less than what's needed. With consumption expected at roughly 1,200 tons per day, shortages will hit in less than 2 weeks. Motorization is another weak point. A 17-year-old gunner from a rocket launcher unit later recalls, "It often happened that one truck towed 3 launchers. Sometimes the Funkkraft wagon used by the unit commander was also hitched on behind the whole train." He adds that it looked more like a circus than a dangerous military unit. The lack of vehicles slows movement and increases fatigue. Across the lines, American troops are resting, expecting calm. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel B. Strickler later remembers the sector was considered quiet, with no major fighting since the push to the German border in September. Still, some soldiers sense something is off. One GI reports, "We're constantly being hit by reconnaissance patrols all night long. The minute it gets dark, they start shooting to cover the rumble of heavy equipment." Whatever calm existed is about to vanish. On December 15th, German units receive their final orders, and the quiet Ardennes sector is about to explode. A 17-year-old former Navy recruit remembers the tension of that night clearly. The calm silence inside the bunker suddenly disappears, replaced by uneasy whispers and restless movement. Some soldiers even break into nervous excitement, almost euphoric. A hot meal is served, grimly joked about as a hangman's meal, and several men turn to their liquor rations to steady their nerves. Hand grenades, Panzerfausts, and extra small arms ammunition are handed out, and the men are ordered to lie down fully dressed and try to rest. They are supposed to be woken at 4 a.m., but it doesn't matter. No one sleeps. In the early hours of December 16th, German artillery erupts in a massive bombardment, setting the stage for the assault. Once the guns fall silent, German infantry surge forward to clear paths for the armored units. U.S. soldier Charlie Hogg later recalls the moment vividly. "We experienced what was perhaps the biggest hair-raising scare of our entire Army career. Out of the darkness came the awfulest screaming and yelling you'd ever want to hear. The Germans were coming." He adds that in the northern sector, they were screaming like a bunch of wild Indians. Despite committing 4 panzer divisions, the Germans immediately run into serious trouble. Their first objective, securing Elsenborn Ridge, fails. The forest is so dense that only a handful of narrow roads are usable, creating massive traffic jams. Commanders push reserves forward too early in an attempt to force a breakthrough, but this only worsens the congestion and confusion. In the central sector, German forces have better luck. On the first day, U.S. units are spread dangerously thin, allowing Manteuffel's Panthers to punch through in several areas. Results across the front are mixed. 7th Army spearheads cross the Our and Sauer rivers using assault boats and initially suffer light losses, but progress quickly stalls. A lack of bridging equipment and accurate U.S. artillery fire pins most of 7th Army on the eastern river banks. By the time fighting slows at the end of the first day, large portions of the army remain unable to advance. One American GI describes the aftermath in a letter home. Everywhere there's a tangle of shell-shot tree trunks and the litter of prolonged fighting at close quarters. Bits of broken rifles, bayonets, shattered helmets, unexploded hand grenades, fragments of shell, displaced sandbags, broken stretchers, boots and gloves, not quite empty, and shreds of uniform and equipment. The battlefield is torn apart. By the evening of December 16th, Allied headquarters still believes the attack is limited in scope. The true scale becomes clear the following day when Germany launches two special operations. The first is an airborne mission aimed at seizing key road junctions and bridges ahead of the main advance. The operation quickly goes wrong. Poor coordination with ground forces and minimal preparation time doomed the effort. Only about 300 German paratroopers reach their drop zones. They hide in the woods for 3 days with little food or water, waiting for support that never arrives. Eventually, the survivors split up and quietly slip back across the lines by December 20th. The second special mission, codenamed Operation Greif, is led by Otto Skorzeny. His men slip through the front lines wearing American uniforms, aiming to spread confusion by switching road signs, cutting telephone wires, and giving false directions. The plan sounds clever on paper, but reality hits fast. Most of the teams are quickly detected, captured, or killed once U.S. forces realize what's happening. Before the operation, German legal advisors had told Skorzeny that wearing enemy uniforms was technically allowed as long as they weren't used during combat. That may have worked in theory, but in practice, soldiers wearing friendly uniforms were often shot on sight during the war. Operation Greif officially ends on the evening of December 17th, when a frustrated Skorzeny receives permission to deploy his remaining men as a regular combat brigade instead. By now, Germany's desperation offensive is fully underway. The military results are uneven, and where German units do push forward, serious crimes occur. The most infamous formation involved is Kampfgruppe Peiper, commanded by Joachim Peiper. Already behind schedule and under intense pressure, Peiper drives his unit forward ruthlessly, and the outcome is a series of mass killings. Members of Kampfgruppe Peiper shoot prisoners at multiple locations: 19 at Hansfeld, 59 at Bühlingen, 44 at Ligneuville, and 58 more at Stavelot. The most notorious incident occurs on December 17th near Malmedy, where nearly 100 American prisoners are murdered. These killings are carried out to avoid the delay of escorting prisoners to the rear, leaving a permanent stain on the operation. Civilians across the region fear the German return. In German-speaking Eastern Belgium, many residents had initially supported reunification with Nazi Germany back in 1940. Over time, however, second-class treatment and harsh rule wear that support down. By 1944, enthusiasm has faded, though pockets of pro-German sentiment still exist, and there are reports of locals assisting advancing units. Luxembourg tells a very different story. Anger toward German occupation explodes after conscription, and forced labor are introduced in 1942. By 1944, many Luxembourgers are active in the resistance, using their German language skills to gather intelligence and pass it to American forces through French-speaking Belgium. When the Allies liberate the region in September 1944, they are welcomed openly. That relief turns to fear again in December as German security units return. Families flee west alongside Belgian refugees, trying to escape the fighting and reprisals. As the situation deteriorates and German pressure increases, Allied commanders convene an emergency crisis meeting on December 20th, aware that the battle has reached a dangerous turning point. Allied commanders decide to place American forces north of the German breakthrough under British control, assigning them to Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's 21st Army Group. U.S. 12th Army Group Commander Omar Bradley is furious at the decision but ultimately accepts his orders. Despite the tension, the change allows Allied reinforcements to reach the battlefield faster and with better coordination. Within a single week, roughly 250,000 American troops, along with British units from XXX Corps, arrive in the threatened sector. By December 23rd, the German advance begins to slow as the element of surprise fades. German forces lack the logistics, fuel, and motor transport needed to push supplies forward along increasingly stretched supply lines. German propaganda films attempt to hide these problems by showing large numbers of tanks. The reality on the ground is very different. In the Ardennes, the German army relies on horses at nearly 40 times the rate it uses tanks. Conditions worsen dramatically once the weather clears. On December 23rd, Allied fighter bombers finally take to the skies and tear into German columns, forcing movement to night hours only and stripping away mobility and flexibility. Poorly equipped German infantry now takes heavy losses from accurate American artillery fire. Tanks are often forced to attack towns without infantry support, a role they are poorly suited for. Christmas Eve marks the high point of the entire German offensive. Although the advance grinds down on December 24th, the Battle of the Bulge is far from finished. Earlier, on December 20th, German troops surround the vital Belgian transport hub of Bastogne. Roughly 15,000 American soldiers are trapped inside, including Private Joseph Sack. He later recalls, "Early Tuesday morning we were surrounded, and the Germans began to close in on us. As the day rolled on, the enemy showered us with mortar, artillery, and machine gun fire." He adds, "Men were going mad. There was no organization, there was nowhere to go. We were all scared." German commanders planned to seize Bastogne quickly with a surprise assault, but the attempt fails. U.S. command immediately recognizes the town's strategic importance and responds with speed and flexibility. Orders are issued on December 17th, and within 48 hours more than 3,000 trucks rush 12,000 troops and supplies from the 101st Airborne Division into the town. Initial German probing attacks against Bastogne fail. Faced with resistance, German commanders make a critical decision. While two panzer divisions continue pushing west, the 26th Volksgrenadier Division is left behind to contain and besiege Bastogne, a choice that will have major consequences for the rest of the campaign. Panzer Division Commander Fritz Bayerlein later regrets the decision not to concentrate forces against Bastogne. After the war, he admits, "It was one of the greatest mistakes. Bastogne was not immediately captured by a concentrated attack of all our forces. If this had been done, it would certainly have fallen. German forces simply lack the artillery ammunition needed to break the American defenses by force. Instead, the Germans attempt a bluff on December 22nd. They issue a demand for the surrounded U.S. troops to surrender. American commander Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe responds with a single, now famous word, nuts. That same day, George Patton's Third Army begins pivoting north toward the besieged town, though it remains unclear how quickly relief can arrive. The first real break for the defenders comes on December 23rd. More than 240 Douglas C-47 transport aircraft drop over 230 tons of supplies into Bastogne. Food, ammunition, and medical gear rain down over the following days, keeping the defenders in the fight. German assaults grow more desperate but fail to break through, even as Patton's relief force closes the distance. Patton's troops finally smash through on December 27th. They overrun the weakened and starving German 5th Fallschirmjäger Division, punching a corridor into the town. American tanks roll forward under fire and make contact with the encircled paratroopers. German counterattacks against the narrow supply route follow, but none succeed. Third Army continues pushing east, and on January 16th, U.S. forces link up with First Army units advancing from the north near Houffalize. This connection marks the end of the battle for Bastogne. Around 20,000 Americans, 4,500 of them from the 101st Airborne alone, and roughly 25,000 Germans are killed fighting over a town that had a peacetime population of just 4,000 people, located at a junction of 7 key roads. The Battle of the Bulge, however, stretches far beyond Bastogne. With the strategic initiative back in Allied hands, American forces launch a broad counteroffensive to retake lost ground. Superior artillery and air power are used systematically. Fighter bombers and heavy guns reduce German-held villages before infantry and armor move in to clear resistance. German morale steadily collapses under the relentless pressure. Some units continue fighting out of desperation, occasionally coercing civilians or prisoners into digging trenches or preparing defenses. Amid this brutal phase of the campaign, an incident occurs on January 1, 1945, when U.S. forces commit a serious violation of the laws of war after capturing the heavily defended hamlet of Chonony, adding another dark chapter to an already devastating battle. Sergeant John Faig later describes what he witnessed during the fighting. "I know some of our boys were lining up German prisoners in the fields on both sides of the road. There must have been 25 or 30 German boys in each group." He continues, "These boys were to be machine gunned and murdered. We were committing the same crimes we were now accusing the Japanese and Germans of doing. Feig recalls turning away from the scene and walking up the hill, unable to watch what followed. That same day, Germany launches another desperate effort, Operation Bodenplatte. The plan calls for nearly all remaining operational German fighter aircraft in the west to take off simultaneously, strike Allied airfields, and destroy enemy planes on the ground. Shortly after daybreak, around 1,000 German aircraft rise into the sky. One pilot later recalls the moment. "I was amazed. The sky was full of machines. Civilians stood there frozen. When we flew over the front, even the soldiers stopped and stared." The excitement does not last long. Luftwaffe Commander Hermann Göring issues brutal orders. Any pilot who returns without attacking an enemy airfield must immediately take off again and launch another strike. The command proves disastrous. On second passes, German pilots no longer have surprise, making them easy targets for anti-aircraft fire. Coordination problems with ground forces make things worse. Several German aircraft are mistakenly fired on by their own troops. Fuel shortages, already severe, are compounded by long flight distances. By the end of the operation, Germany loses more than 300 aircraft. The Allies lose roughly 260 planes, but they replace those losses quickly. Germany cannot replace theirs at all. Fighting continues into early January as Allied forces steadily push forward against stubborn resistance. On January 10th, German High Command effectively concedes defeat in the Ardennes by pulling 3 panzer divisions out of the line and sending them east. Beginning on January 12th, the Red Army launches its winter offensive along the Vistula River, forcing Germany to divert every remaining reserve eastward. German forces in the Ardennes are weakened even further. The Eastern Front stabilizes only about 70 kilometers from Berlin, after Soviet forces temporarily outrun their supply lines. From this point on, German units in the Bulge are reduced to rearguard actions, fighting only to delay the inevitable. On January 28th, the U.S. Army officially declares the Battle of the Bulge over. The campaign costs the Americans approximately 8,600 killed, 21,000 missing, and 47,000 wounded, along with nearly 20,000 non-battle casualties caused by frostbite and trench foot. German losses are even heavier, around 15,500 killed, 27,500 missing or captured, and 42,000 wounded. Civilian losses are severe as well. More than 2,500 Belgian civilians and around 500 Luxembourgers die during the fighting. Many are killed by German security forces or pillaging troops, while roughly 1,000 perish during Allied air raids on German-held villages. Entire towns and villages are left in ruins, requiring years to rebuild infrastructure, recover the dead, and clear unexploded ordnance. The Ardennes Offensive ends as a clear German defeat after more than a month of brutal combat. But the question remains, was there ever a real chance for the German plan to succeed? The offensive suffers from deep structural flaws. Supplies are insufficient and often unloaded far behind the front. Many units are informed of the attack only hours before it begins, leaving no time for proper reconnaissance of terrain or enemy strength. As a result, troops advance blindly into combat. These failures reflect the growing paranoia of German leadership. Secrecy is prioritized over preparation, weakening execution from the start. Another major mistake lies in force allocation. Germany assigns its strongest units to Sepp Dietrich's SS Panzer Army in the northern sector, where Allied resistance is expected to be strongest. This runs counter to standard military logic, which favors reinforcing weaker enemy sectors to exploit breakthroughs and encircle opposing forces. The reasoning behind this decision is partly political. After the July 20th assassination attempt, Hitler loses confidence in the regular army and places greater trust in the Waffen-SS. However, SS formations often suffer from inefficient planning and ideology-driven assumptions, reducing their effectiveness despite their reputation. Even if these units had been used more skillfully, success still depends on factors beyond German control. The plan relies heavily on prolonged bad weather and the rapid capture of Allied fuel depots. It remains unclear how German forces, far less motorized than their opponents, could realistically reach those depots first. By late 1944, the German army is no longer a match for its enemies. It is increasingly made up of last-ditch formations, equipped with outdated weapons and crippled by logistical shortages. Germany lacks the industrial capacity to replace losses, making prolonged defense impossible. In the end, the Battle of the Bulge exposes not only tactical failure, but the irreversible collapse of Germany's ability to wage modern war. One of the most decisive factors in the failure of the Ardennes Offensive is clear once the weather breaks. Complete Allied air superiority shatters German supply lines, destroys logistical hubs, and provides relentless fire support for ground troops. Once Allied aircraft return to the skies, German movement becomes slow, dangerous, and increasingly impossible. Hitler's political goals are just as unrealistic. There is never any real chance of a compromise peace with the Western Allies. By late 1944, Britain and the United States have already agreed with the Soviet Union on post-war plans for Germany and firmly committed to fighting the war through to unconditional surrender. No separate peace is on the table. With all this in mind, the German offensive is doomed from the start. The Battle of the Bulge ends as a total German failure, tactically, strategically, and politically. Nazi leadership badly underestimates American strength and determination, while wildly overestimating Germany's remaining capabilities. The gamble collapses under its own weight. Instead of changing the course of the war, the Ardennes Offensive wastes Germany's last meaningful reserves. It prolongs the conflict only slightly while accelerating the Red Army's push toward Berlin. After the Bulge, Western Allied forces regroup and surge forward into Germany's industrial heartland in February and March of 1945. The final set-piece battles on the Western Front follow quickly. During the Rhineland campaign and the Battle for the Rhine, combined British and American forces fight their way to Germany's last major natural barrier. In a massive show of coordination, the Allies launch a huge amphibious river crossing alongside the largest single-day airborne operation of the entire war, clearing the final path into the German heartland. And that's where this chapter ends. If you enjoyed this breakdown, like, subscribe, share, and drop a comment below, and let us know what you want to see next here on Battalica.